Hello, welcome to 5.1 representing a relationship. This lesson is all about how can we use words and symbols to describe a relationship between quantities. And this comes from the sixth grade standard on ratios and proportions, the first one. For a warm-up, we were looking at this group of blocks over here that and thinking of ways that we could sort or categorize this set of data. And in our notes, we wrote the word warm up and we put a box around it. And then we just answered the questions. We didn't write all these words. So thinking of a way that we could sort or categorize this set, we could sort it by color. And there's 4 groups, and there's reds and yellows and greens. And blues, and there's 6 of these and 5 of the other ones. And we can sort them by other things. We can sort them by shape. We can sort them by number of blocks. And we could decide all kinds of different groupings here. Our vocabulary word for today is ratio, and we're pronouncing that ratio, not radio, not ratio, but ratio. And a ratio is a comparison of 2 or more quantities. Comparison of 2 or more quantities. Quantities meaning numbers that are things that we count. So for example, a ratio of 3 to 2, and I'm reading that colon as the word to, as in to, could describe a recipe that uses 3 cups of flour for every 2 eggs, or a boat that moves 3 meters every 2 seconds. One way we can represent this ratio of 3 to 2 is using a diagram that has 3 blue squares for every 2 green squares. And we see those 3 squares again, and then 2 more. So another ratio we could have written for this diagram in particular would be a ratio of 6 to 4, since we have 6 total blue blocks and 4 green blocks. In ratios, the order matters. The words listed first, those labels, should correspond with the first number, and we'll see that later in our lesson. And the other thing to remember or to key into is the idea of for every means the smallest group that maintains that ratio. So when you see those words for every 2 green squares, that's the smallest amount that we could have without kind of messing up our ratio or making it sound funny. Moving on. All right, example 1. We have using ratio language. In our notes, we're going to write that example 1 using ratio language. And when we're done, we're going to write some sentence stems that we see. So we have here the group of calculators, protractors, and compasses, and we can write some ratio statements to go along with this picture. We're not listing these items, we're comparing their quantities. So there are 5 graphing calculators to 7 protractors. There are 7 protractors to 5 graphing calculators. Now notice that this is the same sentence, just kind of in reverse order. The order is important, though. That 5 graphing calculators, the 5 and the calculators need to kind of stay together. There are 4 compasses to 7 protractors. There's 5 calculators to how many compasses? 4 compasses. There are 7 protractors to blank total objects. Now, when I'm counting the total, I want to include the protractors with the calculators and the compasses. So this is a total of 16, not 9. And the number of graphing calculators is something of the total number of objects. Since we're talking about the total, we can also use a ratio to represent as a fraction. So the number of graphing calculators is 5 16ths of the total, or 5 calculators out of the 16 objects, right? That denominator meaning the whole of the objects. So our sentence stems, things that we saw, are there are some number of a label, and then the word two, and then another number and label. So there's one sentence. And the other sentence we saw was that last one where we had the sentence starting with the number of, and then some label, is, and then a fraction of the total. So those are two sentence stems for ratio language. We're going to see some more examples here on the next slide. So partner practice, it says we're going to discuss the statements and circle those that correctly describe the situation that we see here. So Elena mixed 2 cups of white paint with 6 tablespoons of blue paint. Here's a diagram that represents the situation. So we've got 2 white paint and 6 blue paint. And we want to decide which of these statements over here are true. So the ratio of cups of white paint to tablespoons of blue paint is 2 to 6. So the white paint came first, and the first number is 2. White paint is 2. White paint is 2. Blue paint is 6, because that's the second label and the second number. Blue paint is 6. So this statement is true. Next one. For every cup of white paint, there are 2 tablespoons of blue paint. It doesn't have a number. So if we don't see a number, we're going to assume that they mean the number 1. So for every one, I should put that 1 here. For every 1 cup of white paint, there are 2 tablespoons of blue paint. Wait. For 1 white, it says there's only 2. I think that's false. There should be 3. There is 1 cup of white paint for every 3 tablespoons of blue paint. There it is. That's the true statement that fixes number 2. There are 3 tablespoons of blue paint for every cup of white paint. 3 tablespoons of blue paint for every cup of white paint. 3 tablespoons of blue for every, we don't see a number, so we're going to assume 1 for one of these. That's true. For each tablespoon of blue paint, there are 3 cups of white paint. For each tablespoon, that means 1 tablespoon of blue paint and there's 3 cups of white paint. I don't see 3 cups of white paint up here. This is false. For every 6 tablespoons of blue paint, there are 2 cups of white paint. For every 6 tablespoons of blue paint, there are 2 cups of white paint. We've got 6 blue, 2 white. This is true. And the last one, the ratio of tablespoons of blue paint to cups of white paint is 6 to 2. Okay, tablespoons of blue is first, and our first number is 6. Okay, so far so good. Second label is white paint. Second number is 2. 2. This is true. All right. So in this case, we see that order is really important. We want the order of the labels to match the order of the numbers if the ratio isn't built into the sentence like it is up here in 3 and 4. All right, on your own, you're going to try writing 2 sentences that describe a ratio of types of animals in this collection.